So this is group 7 of the student-led discussion. We are an online group. Myself, Julie Zaharis, Brenda Chen, and Ibuken, Julia Akinboyewa. I don't think I said that right. So our article was the prevalence of obesity and severe obesity in U.S. children from 1999 to 2016. It was published in the Journal of Pediatrics in 2018 and was a retrospective analysis of data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, or the NANES survey, which combines interviews as well as physical data to assess the health and nutritional status of adults and children in the United States. So childhood obesity is a growing public health issue that has the potential to become endemic in the United States. Even with large-scale efforts on a national level, this has been really a steady increase in the rates of pediatric obesity. In recent years, though, we've had some confusion on the rates and whether or not there has been a decline and or stabilization in some of the age groups. While this article is not really suggesting an innovative change or an intervention, it's just seeking to clarify and provide current data on the rates of obesity, pediatric obesity. Because if public health care workers cannot determine if their efforts are resulting in positive changes, then attention and interventions may need to be redirected to more specific groups, with the thought being that not every intervention will be successful in every target population. So according to the article, there has been an increase in the prevalence of obesity, which is not surprising, especially in certain groups such as Latino and African Americans. This suggests that being disadvantaged is a predictor of a higher risk for obesity. Unfortunately, as my group member Brenda Chen will discuss, there were not many factors that were controlled for, such as socioeconomic status, education, employment, and citizenship. So I had 2 discussion questions. The first one was from Amelia Iglesias, on what could account for the differences in obesity prevalence between African American, Hispanics, and Asian Americans, and then what intervention. So I'm going to answer the first part of that first, and then I'll talk about interventions with another person's question. So there are really many factors, including but not limited to genetic, cultural, and economic. So I'm going to take just the genetic and cultural and talk about those, because we know that economic is going to be addressed in other, I know that that's going to be addressed in some other discussion questions, because there were a lot of questions about that. So genetics research has suggested that genetics may contribute 40 to 70% to the obesity risk, with over 50 genes that affect or protect you from obesity. So either predispose you or protect you from obesity. One gene that's known to predispose people to gain excess weight is the fat mass and obesity gene, and it's called the FTO for short. It can cause increased hunger levels, decreased satiety, so you don't feel as full as soon as you should, decreased control on overeating, and an increased tendency to store fat and an increased tendency to be sedentary. Cultural influences, that includes the perception of body image, especially with African American men. They're more likely to express a preference for a larger body size than women, and additionally Latinas tend to prefer a thinner size, but they really prefer a plumper size for their children. Culture also influences the perception of risk associated with obesity. With globalization, we're starting to see some flip of perceptions. Historically, people, especially people in lower socioeconomic statuses, thought that the bigger someone was, that it meant that they had more money or they were in a higher socioeconomic level. And we're starting to see, with exposure to media, especially exposure to media from the U.S. and other industrialized nations, that they're starting to retract that and think that a thinner body type is really more related to increased socioeconomic status and is more desirable. You see that a lot in Latin American countries. The bigger the baby is, they think that the better the baby is as far as health concerns go. And then Kim, well, restrictions such as limiting or the restriction of sugary drinks, will we see decreased rates of obesity? So in theory, we should see decreased rates of obesity. As many people really don't realize that sugary drinks, including fruit juice, they think that fruit juice is nutritional, but they really have no nutritional value at all. And people don't realize that. They think since it says fruit that they, instead of eating fruit, that's how their child will, if their child won't eat fruit, that they can feed them fruit juice, and that will be appropriate. But really, in reality, there are about 30 calories per ounce in most of the sugary beverages, and most children sippy cups aren't an 8 ounce, or meaning a 1 cup size. The American Academy of Pediatrics says that no child should have more than 6 ounces of a sugary beverage a day, and the average sippy cup or cup is anywhere from 10 to 20 ounces. And so that means that kids are drinking, and just in one drink, 300 to 600 calories per drink, which means that they could have upwards of nearly 2,000 calories of a sugary beverage a day. Certainly cutting that and making that restricted so that children aren't drinking that would be preferable and advisable. But the interventions, especially for children in disenfranchised groups, are really kind of complex. So just doing that one intervention, in theory, we should see a decrease in obesity rates, but we probably won't see that. Really, healthcare workers have to consider all of the things. So genetics, socioeconomic status, culture, all that really needs to be considered when planning an obesity prevention program. And you really can't plan one program and assign it to the masses. So you really would need to look at it as a community and plan in a community setting. Target at-risk communities. So, at risk, you could do it at a Y or a boys club, girls and boys club, where those children were coming and they were all from some of the same cultural backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds. We really need to use a socioecological framework, which really looks at the child within the context of their family, their community, and their culture. It focuses on those interactions of the child with their physical, social, and cultural surroundings, and it places the emphasis on the relationships among the environmental, biological, and behavioral determinants of health. So those interventions should be based off those relationships and those interactions. And so really kind of a great way to do that is to sort of sit down with the family and talk about snacks, talk about family meals. Many cultural groups, especially on a Sunday, will have, extended family over. Everybody brings food. What does that food look like? What is the child eating? I worked in a pediatric weight management center, and that was one of the things that we did was we sat down with the family, and really you have to treat the entire family, not just the child. So I think when we start to really look at pediatric interventions in weight management, you really almost not now just really looking at the family. I think that was one of the places where we sort of failed, was just looking at the family. You really have to look at the community in a whole, and if everybody's not on board, then we may or may not be successful. And so I think as we move forward as healthcare workers, we really have to consider all of the determinants, and a program that works in X community may not work in Y community. And so that's really kind of important for us to really kind of start thinking about. It's a complex issue. Even if you take just the genetics out of it, it's just so complex. I hope that you enjoy our discussion, and I look forward to continuing it online. Thank you.